Hey everybody, this is Nearpod 301, getting the most out of Nearpod. So this is the third video in a series that I have been doing on Nearpod. The first one, Nearpod 101, was about a lot of the basics of Nearpod, from creating your account to accessing the lesson library and using some of the materials that they already have for you and doing live lessons and stuff like that. And then in Nearpod 201, we talked about designing lessons and activities in Nearpod that are your own and some of the different types of activities that you can use. And so today we're going to be talking about a lot of little tips and tricks and nuggets and things that will make Nearpod a little bit easier, a little bit better to use as you're going along. So in today's session, we're going to talk about staying organized and ready to launch. So the things that you can do to help before you launch a lesson. And then during the lesson, there are things that you can add and change as you're going along to kind of help out if you need to adjust on the fly, as we often do when we're teaching kids. And then after the lesson, about how we can see and organize and keep track of the student responses that we get from the things that we do in Nearpod. So as I began with in the first two sessions, the most important keyboard shortcut you'll need to know today, especially if you are following along with Nearpod on one window and you have this video that you're watching on another window on the same machine and you're switching back and forth, which is Alt-Tab. And this is the keyboard shortcut for switching windows. And this is for Chromebook, as well as I think Windows is also Alt-Tab. And if you're on a Mac, it is Command-Tab. Or in this case, if you're going between two different Chrome windows, you would do Command and then the key, which is above the tab, which I think is called the tilde. I don't actually know what it's called, but it's called something or other. It's right above the tab key, and that will switch between windows of the same program. Command tab will switch between different programs. So let's talk about before the lesson. So the things that we can do in Nearpod before we even launch the lesson so that we can stay organized and ready to launch. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Nearpod. And I want you to notice that on my screen, you'll see that I have these folders that I've created, and I'm organizing my lessons by grade. So as you create lessons, they will populate in this space, this part of the screen. But over time, that can get to be a little bit unruly and disorganized. So folders are one way that you can kind of sort the activities that you're doing so that they're easier to find and easier to keep track of. So all you really need to do to create a folder is press on this button that says plus folder. And then you just give the folder a name. Call this test folder. And then now you'll see it says the folder, test folder, has been saved. And now you are inside that folder. So I'm going to go back a step to my lessons. And now when I hover over my lesson here, you'll see that I have this thing that says drag to folder. And I'm just going to hover my cursor over it, and you'll see that my cursor has changed to those four little arrows. And I'm just going to click and move, and I'm going to put it right on top of test folder. And then there it is. It's now in test folder. Pretty simple. I can go in there, and then I can find my lessons. Notice that when you are in a folder, that the create button does not appear here. You can only create lessons from your dashboard screen. You'll have to go back to that place, back to your dashboard, before you can go ahead and create a lesson. So that is how we can create and manage folders. So creating a folder gives you some other options as well. If we go back into our test folder here, where it says test folder right there, you'll see this little triangle, which means that there's a drop down there. And I'm going to go ahead and click on it. And we got some different things that we can do here. We can share, which I'll talk about that in a second. We have add lessons. So you can actually look for lessons that are already in your library and just add them over into this folder. You can rename. you can remove, and you can also set a color. So if you want this to be blue, now if I go back to my lessons, you'll see that this one is color coded in blue. And I can just change it to whatever color I want. So real quick, let's go ahead and talk about sharing lessons with other teachers within your school district or within your grade level or something like that. So you have the ability to share individual Nearpod lessons as well as an entire folder of Nearpod lessons. And we're going to talk about the folder first since we're on that subject of folders. So we talked about in the menu under the folder, you can hit share. And then all you've got to do is just type the email address to whoever you want to share it to and hit send. And they'll get an email that will say that, hey, you've shared a library or a folder with them, and they can choose to add it to their library. Now, just so you know, even though you're sharing it with them, that it will, when they go to add it to their library, it will count against their storage as well as your storage, because it's basically kind of making a copy. So when you go to share a folder with somebody and then you go to add a different Nearpod lesson in it, it doesn't also add it to that other person's folder. It's not like a shared Google Drive folder in that sense. You're kind of just making a copy of what you sent them. And so anything else you add to it, you would have to send later. So that's how to share a folder. And then if you hover over an individual lesson, you want to share that, you'll hit 3 dots and then you'll just hit share with teachers. And you'll notice that you'll get a pretty similar type menu that you can use to share an individual lesson. So you can also add folders inside of folders. So if you wanted to, if you were down in this menu and you created, let's say you created another folder out here, but you actually wanted to put it inside the test folder, then you can actually just click and drag it into there. So now if I go test folder, here we are, we now have a subfolder. I could move that lesson into that subfolder. You can also click from this menu here and you can add a folder this way. And then now we have subfolder 2 that I just created. It's under my test folder. And so you can go, I'm not sure how deep you can go with adding folders, but you do have the ability to do folders inside of folders, which is pretty neat. And then I can just click on, I'm actually going to move this. I'm going to move it back to my lessons. And you can also just go and click and you can remove it. So now we're back here and just want to make sure you move all of your materials that you want to keep, I should say, out of that folder because they can be deleted when you go to delete the folder as well. So now the next thing that I want to talk about is quick launch. And so sometimes you may be doing an activity with the kids that's off the computer. You're not doing it in Nearpod. You haven't prepared a lesson for it, but something comes up and you might want to capture something in what it is they're learning right on the spot, but you don't have time to make a whole new lesson for it. So that's where something like quick launch can help. So if I go into the top right corner and where it says quick launch, I'm going to click, and then it gives you 4 options for quick launch activities that you can start without having to do any sort of lesson creation beforehand. So the simplest one is just timer. If you go to press on timer, and then you're basically going to say how long do you want to set your timer for. So I want to say 1 minute, and then I'm going to hit quick launch, and we're going to get this button. We're going to press start timer. We're going to get a countdown, and now we have this nice little timer that is very easy to put on a TV or a projector and share. So if you want students to know how much time they have left, you can certainly do that. You can pause the timer. You can restart the timer that way. You can restart it from the beginning. So we're going to go back to, we're going to get the countdown again. Back from 1 minute. You can add an additional 30 seconds, or you can remove an additional, or remove 30 seconds, I should say. But in any case, you've got this convenient little timer that you can use in your classroom. So the next thing we can do in Quick Launch, and I'm just going to show one more because for the most part, the rest of the activities work very similarly, which is I'm going to ask an open-ended question. And so you'll see when I get that, now you're going to see, just like I demonstrated with open-ended questions in Nearpod 201, you're going to have your text box here and your formatting tools. And you cannot talk and type at the same time. So you can ask your question, just like with the open-ended question within your lessons, a fully prepared lesson. You can add supporting media, you can add your timer, and you can enable student audio recordings, which means they can record with their microphone. They can answer with their voice instead of having to type the response. But in any case, whatever you want to set in here, once you have your question ready to go, you're just going to press Quick Launch. And then just like when you go to launch any sort of regular lesson, it's going to bring you into a live lesson window, and you're going to have a code for your students to enter, and then they can come in and join the Quick Launch lesson that you made and answer the question. So again, you can do something like that really quickly without having to plan and design a whole lesson ahead of time. So again, we'll just go over the activities one more time that you can do with Quick Launch. Because again, you may not have a Nearpod lesson that you're doing with the kids, but something comes up and you might want to use Nearpod to capture the students' responses. So that's when something like Quick Launch would come in handy. So you can just press it, and then you've got the choices of open-ended question, draw it, collaborate board, or timer. So you've got a combination of student response, you've got a combination of feedback and students kind of working together on something, and drawing out a response as well. So a nice assortment of activities that you can just launch, in a snap. So one other thing that I want to make you aware of as you're doing your Nearpod lessons is expiration dates of codes. Those 5-digit codes in the top left corner when you launch a lesson that the students use to access your session. Now, this actually only shows up on student-paced sessions, so the things that they're doing independently at their own speed that you're not controlling. But when I go to press where it says student-paced to launch a lesson, you're going to see here that in addition to this code that I have, I also have down here, it says 29 days remaining. So by default, when you launch a student-paced lesson, the code will be active for 30 days. Now, if you don't want it to be open for 30 days, you can change it. So I can go ahead and press right there, and then you'll see here is your window. So March 10th being the day that I'm recording this, so that's the first day, and then 30 days later on April 9th, that's when this code no longer works. So if you're sharing it on Google Classroom or somewhere else, when it gets to April 10th, they're going to go click on that link and it's not going to work anymore. So if you want to shorten it, basically you are just going to click on the day that you want it to stop. So I can make it stop on Friday the 12th, or like in my case where my lessons right now are all fully asynchronous, and students can kind of join at their own pace, or if they want to work on something. I'm just leaving all of mine open until the end of the school year. So I can make it June 7th. And I'm not sure how far out you can go, but at the beginning of the year when I was starting to launch these, I was in the 100 plus days, and that didn't seem to be any issue. And then once you decide when your end date is, you just hit apply. And then you'll still have the same ability to share things out with the different channels. This slide or two, just want to talk about this part really quickly. So let's say that you have a video that you want your students to watch and then respond to after. So you don't necessarily want them to just skip through everything and not respond, just kind of blow it off. So when this check is off, that means that they don't have to watch the whole video. They can just press play and then press the next page and go on to the next page. And when they go to answer the question, they can just skip through that too. When you have this will make it so that they have to enter a response in order to move to the next thing. Now, again, they can totally blow that off and just smash the keys a little bit. But I hope that students would understand that that's not an acceptable response and they actually have to put something there. And what it also will do is it will make it so that they can't just fast forward through the video. They can't go and move the slider to the end. They actually have to watch the entire video, which is another thing that is pretty nice about it. So I just wanted to let you know about this. And like I said, this is only for student-paced sessions that you launch. So finally, I want to talk about account settings. This is something we haven't really talked about. Even though we discussed creating your account, we never actually took a look at some of the settings. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to click on my avatar in the top right corner. And I'm just going to select where it says Manage Nearpod Account. And you're going to see that it's got your personal and school information, teacher information. I haven't entered that, but that's fine. You'll see right here, here's where you can tell how much storage you've used and how much you have left. So I'm on the gold version, the paid version. So I have 1 gigabyte of storage and I'm currently using 55.8 megabytes. So that's plenty of storage. On the free version, it's only 100 megabits. So that would be more than half of my storage is being used. So I'd have to start to think about doing something where I may have to get rid of a few lessons or do something to save space. I'm going to go to where it says Advanced. And there's a couple of options in here in particular that I want to go over with you. The first one, enable student names to autofill. So when a student joins a session, it's going to ask them for their name, and then they would just type their name in the box. Now, we know how some of our students are, that they're not going to put their name. They're going to put something random, like a nickname, or they're going to put just something that doesn't identify them as easy as you should. So when you go to check this box here, that step when they go to enter their name, it's actually going to ask them to log in with their Google or their Office 365, which we obviously don't have. So they would hit the sign in with Google button, and then it's going to pull the name from their Google account, so they don't have a chance to put in a silly nickname. You're going to know who they are because it's pulling it straight from their Google account. So that slider being on does that. So this next feature is something that I discussed in Nearpod 201, which is the immersive reader. And so if I slide over a screen and I take a look at this little button right here where my cursor is, that is the immersive reader. And what that will do is that will enable a speech to text, but not just speech to text. There are other kinds of features to it as well. And it's one thing that's really cool is that it actually also works with text that is inside of images. So you'll notice when I hit this button here that you'll see it was able to pull the text from my picture, Welcome to Tech Wednesday, Activity Design in Nearpod. So that's pretty cool that it has the ability to do that, and I can press play and have it do its thing. So if you want this icon to appear for your students, that's something that you need to check under your settings to turn that on. Enable student notes is only available in the district version of Nearpod, so you can't even turn it on. You'll get this nice little message being like, "Hey, this is a premium feature. Pay up." Require student responses and prevent skipping in student-paced mode. We were just talking about this inside of an individual lesson, which basically, when you turn this on, it just means that when you go to share that student-paced lesson, that check is going to be on by default, and you would have to turn it off if you wanted to turn it you didn't want to have that enabled. Whereas by default it's off and you have to turn it on. So whichever one you want, it doesn't really matter, because when you go to share the lesson, you can still turn it on or off. And then the last thing are email notifications. And we're going to go ahead and manage those. And you can just check and uncheck whatever you want to receive for email. So the one that I have checked is notify me when there is activity in my Nearpod student-paced lessons. And basically what that will do is it'll send an email once a day for any lessons that have been completed. If nothing's been completed, then you won't get any email. But if something is completed, you'll get an email at some point during that day, and it will show you which lessons were accessed and how many students completed them. So I have that one on just because I'm not necessarily going to be constantly going in and checking my Nearpod lessons, my student-paced ones, to see who's done what. So having this checked kind of gives me a little bit of ease of mind of, okay, I have this queue that I can use to then go in and look for it afterward. So now we're going to talk about adjusting on the fly, the things that we can do inside of our Nearpod lesson to kind of help us with adjusting as we go along. So it's not necessarily a static lesson that you go through. There are things that you can do while the lesson is going on to kind of change it up and respond to the needs and the feedback of your students. So I'm actually going to slide over to this screen right here. And we're going to talk about toggling the student and teacher view. So you'll see right here on the left side, which is the teacher view that's up already. But in the top right corner, you're going to press where it says switch to student view. And then when you go to do that, you're going to see that it's now changing. And you're going to see just the student side. So this is something that if you are sharing your screen with your students, and so you've got your screen on the projector or the TV, and you're trying to show the kids something, that there may be some times where you don't necessarily want your students to see something that you're doing. Like let's say right here, you've got the answers that the students are submitting. So you may not necessarily want the students to see that part of Nearpod. So you may just want to have the student view kind of reflecting back at them. So that's when a feature like being able to toggle between those, and you can see now it says T, and I can click to go back to teacher view. So that's something that you can use depending on how you want students to see what's on either side. So I'm going to go back to student view really quickly, because another thing that you can do as well is you might want to have the teacher view up on one part of your screen and the student view on another. Or if you're using a Chromecast, for example, you can just cast the student view tab, and you can still have the teacher one open up as your active window on your laptop screen, so that you don't have to worry about whether you're missing something that the students are doing without sort of revealing it to them on the television or the projector. So the other option is that you can open in a separate window. So now you'll see that it just opened automatically a student view window, and it switched the one that was already open back into teacher view. So that's another step that can kind of save you some time, so you're not having to do too much as far as getting that set up where you can see both the student and the teacher view. You can just turn on student view, and then you'll hit that open in separate window. So you are able to see both. So that is one thing that's really, really cool about this. You can basically tailor the experience however you want, which is really nice. Another thing that you can do is you can add an activity. So let's say that you're going along, you're doing your lesson, everything's going to plan, but then the class discussion ends up going in this direction of, wow, I really need to ask this question, or this was something that I forgot to do when I was designing it in the first place, but would be really useful for me to get feedback from my students for. So on the teacher side, you're going to see a button that says Add Activity near the top right, near the student view. And I'm just going to click on it. And now we have 5 different choices for things that we can add to this activity right in the middle, so that we can just change it up right when we need to, and you can get that to your students without having to go in and edit the lesson and then send the code back out. That's too much. But you can go in and add an activity, and this one I think is particularly powerful, which is web content. So you can share a website. So let's say there's a discussion and that reminds me of a website, a really cool website that relates to the topic that you're discussing. You can just go ahead and select web content, and you can just push it right out to them and press share. And you're going to see now on the student side, it just opened a new tab, which is amazing that it would do something like that. So that is one really cool possible activity that you can do. And then one thing that's a little bit different about adding those midstream activities is you'll notice on the teacher side there aren't the arrows to flip between pages. So when you go to add something midstream, in order to get out of it, for this you have to go to the bottom and press where it says close the activity. So I'm just going to do that right now. And yep, we're going to go ahead and end the activity. And you'll see as soon as I do that, it just closed that new tab and brought the student right back to Nearpod. If we go to add a different type of activity, let's go ahead and let's go true or false. Dolphins are amazing. Then you're going to basically select which is the correct response, so true or false. And then I'm going to hit share. Oh, you can also add an image. And you can, if you had a dolphin image on your computer, you could just add it right there. I'm just going to press share. And here we go. And now we now have a true or false question on the student screen. It's going to ask me true or false. Dolphins are amazing. So I'm going to select true or false. And then I think because I'm the teacher in the student view, it's not letting me press submit. But you would just press submit, and then that student's response would show up here on the left side. So go ahead again, we're going to close the activity, and voila, we're back to where we were before. All right, so I had to switch up my windows just a little bit because this too does not show up in the student view if you're logged in with your account and you're teaching, you're presenting as a teacher. So Open Whiteboard is another thing that you can add onto the student screens. Again, just to add something midstream that you need to add. So let's say, you need to demonstrate something like a math problem, right? You can go ahead and just do that right in the middle of the lesson. You can press Open Whiteboard. And then you're now going to see that on the teacher side, have this whiteboard. And on the student side, this has basically just turned completely white. So again, you're taking control of the students' computers in a way, and you can use the tools that you have here on the screen. And you can even see, as I'm drawing it, it is updating on the student devices. So it's very, very quick. Takes basically no time at all for all of this stuff to happen, which is really, really, really cool. And another part of this too is if you go to close your whiteboard, if you haven't deleted anything, when you go to open it again, it's going to have what you had before. So if you needed to kind of do something in steps across multiple slides, you could just toggle this so it's not up all the time, and you can continue to show the students other parts of your lesson and then call it back up if necessary. But if you needed to get rid of it, I'm going to press this trash can down at the bottom, and I'm going to press yes, and now the drawings disappeared on both sides. I can close the whiteboard and move on. And so the whiteboard might in particular come in handy if you're presenting from your tablet, which we're going to talk about in just a second, because you've got a touch screen. It's going to be much easier to draw something on a touch screen than it might be with a trackpad and a mouse. So that actually might be something where you'll have a little bit closer of an experience to like an actual whiteboard compared to trying to do it with your trackpad. So one thing that you can do, because you may prefer to present Nearpod from your laptop, and in a lot of ways it is kind of easier to do it that way, particularly if you're projecting it on a TV or a projector. But let's say you really want to have the benefit of a touch screen when you go to present your lesson and do the whiteboard part. So one of the really cool things about Nearpod, there's so many, I keep saying one of the cool things, but there's so many of them, is that you can be presenting your lesson as the teacher from multiple devices at the same time. So I'm actually going to toggle back over and bring up my iPad so that you'll be able to follow along with what is on my screen here. But basically all I need to do is I'm going to open my web browser. And I'm just going to go to nearpod.com. And we're going to log in, which this works just as well on an Android tablet as well. So any sort of touchscreen device will do just fine. So now that I'm logged into Nearpod, I'm just going to go ahead and select the lesson that I'm currently teaching, and which basically you're going to press it because you don't have a cursor to hover over like you do on a laptop. But I just basically press on the button, and then I'm just going to press live participation, and then this is the session that's currently running. And I'm going to press resume. Don't launch a new live participation because the two codes aren't going to talk to each other. So you'll be having one version of the presentation at one point and then on one device and then a different one on the other. Make sure that you're selecting the active code that you're already showing on one device and then press resume. And then just like with the students, when they access it and it brings them to whatever page you're on, it doesn't leave them on the first page and they have to catch up. It will also bring you to where the same page that you're on with the other the main teacher one as well. And you'll see this was the page that we were on, and I have all of the same tools at my disposal to use with my students. So I can go and add an activity just by tapping on it. And there's that whiteboard right there. And so you can go ahead and just draw. It works so much easier, especially if you have a stylus versus not having a stylus. It's just better. So if you're doing something where you're writing or drawing, it might be easier to do that. One thing I want to mention really quickly, there is a Nearpod app on the App Store as well as the Android. So the Android app, as of right now, I believe can only be used to access lessons from the student side. I don't believe you can go in and like edit or launch a lesson from the teacher side. At least that's the last time I tried it on an Android tablet. The iPad app of Nearpod is a little bit more functional. So you can go into your dashboard, you can create lessons, you can launch lessons. Here's why I'm going to recommend that you don't do it, which is at least the current version of Nearpod that's out there, the app does not have the whiteboard functionality, which again, for me, if I'm using Nearpod on my tablet, that is the exact reason why I'm using Nearpod on my tablet, is to have that whiteboard function. But the iPad app, at least as of when I'm recording this and when I'm accessing it and what version I'm accessing, does not yet support the whiteboard. But if you just go and open your browser and go through Nearpod that way, it has all the same functionality as going to the Nearpod website on your computer, on your laptop, I should say. So that's why I would recommend, at least as of right now, holding off on doing anything with the apps. Just use your browser to get to it instead. So that is how we can manage running a Nearpod lesson using multiple devices. You may even want to have some sort of setup where you might have the student view on your laptop and have that being projected so the students can see it. And then you might want to have your iPad with the teacher view where you're controlling the lesson, because you can carry your tablet around and you can roam and you don't have to be the lecturer in front of the room, per se. So being able to use multiple types of devices for multiple purposes while still doing the same lesson and being able to guide the kids along is really, really nice. All right, let's go ahead and talk about what we can do after the lesson. So we've presented the whole Nearpod lesson, the students were interacting in various ways, and now we want to go back and see what it is they did. We want to make sure that we can capture every student's response and know what their thoughts and their ideas were, so we can assess that to know how much they're learning. So let's go ahead and go back to our Nearpod dashboard. And when you get there, we're going to look for reports. So reports are where we're going to find all of these student responses. And so you can access this two ways. You can either go where it says reports. And what you're going to see here is every single lesson that you have that has student responses for it. If you have a lesson that you don't have any student responses for yet, it doesn't show up here. So one of the things that I like to do is, because sometimes too, trying to go through all of your lessons, especially as you get more and more of them, can be a little bit hard to do. So instead, what I like to do is I like to look for the lesson, because I'm going to know where it is based on my folder scheme and how I organize stuff. And then I'm going to press the three dots as I hover over it. And then I'm going to press reports right there. And you're going to see, in this case, now I'm seeing the report for just this one lesson. So you're not having to wade through and find things. And you'll see here that I have one student that's responded, and you'll see that the session name, because if you generate multiple codes for something, so say that you teach multiple classes, so you're an art teacher or a music teacher, and you're going to be teaching 4 sections of grade 5 whatever, right? Each one of those live is going to become its own session. So you'll see a list of those, and just by default it kind of just puts a timestamp on it of, okay, 2021 March 10, 11:34 is when I launched this. I'm going to click on it, and then it's going to show who has accessed the lesson, and it's also going to show you their responses. So maybe I should find one that has some actual responses to it. Let's go. So when I go to access the summary report for an individual lesson, you're going to start on the summary page, and that's just going to basically just kind of give you some statistical numbers about here are the students that access the session, and here is a percentage of how much they participated. So how many different parts of the lesson did they produce a response for? So 100% obviously means that they were fully involved in the lesson and they turned it in. 0% obviously means there's no response there. Those are two different types of activities that were in this Nearpod. So if you had 2 polls and they only responded to one of them, then you would see 50% instead of 100%. So this number at the end is really what matters, is this total participation. So how much of the total lesson did students produce responses for? So in this case, we have a couple that are 50%. Now, after the summary, we then have the different types of activities that were used in the Nearpod lesson. And so I can switch to a poll and see there's the question. You'll see all of the poll questions in the activity if you had more than one. And you would click on the question, and then you're going to see a summary of all of the student responses, and then for each individual student what their response was. So you get to see down to the individual student. You'll know that this is what student A did, this is what student B did. And then draw it, which in this case, there are no drawings because none of the students in this activity did that because I was rushing through it. But in this case, you would see underneath where it says drawings, you would see a little thumbnail of a picture, and then you would just click on it and it would just expand the picture so you could see what it was. So you have the ability to do that. Where it says downloads, you can download all of the session data either as a PDF, which I think you probably would want to do, or a CSV, which would be like a spreadsheet file. So that way you can keep a permanent copy of what those responses are. I believe that when you delete a lesson from your lesson library, I think it takes the reports with them. So you want to have that backup just in case you're running out of storage. You've got to get rid of one thing to put in another, and you don't lose those responses, which is really nice. Another thing too is you'll see here, I launched 2 different sessions of this particular Nearpod activity. And you know, the timestamp doesn't give you a ton of information. So you may be teaching 4 different classes with the same grade, the same Nearpod lesson, but it's hard to distinguish the difference between the 2. In this case, what you could do is you could click on this little pencil icon and it's going to let you rename that particular session. So you could say teacher A, and you might put a date on it. So in this case, let's see, it said 2/23 on the date. So that way I know this is the report for this class, and this is when they did the activity. And then I can go through and look and see what was produced for responses. So that's another way that you can keep things a little bit more organized. So that is everything that I have for Nearpod 301. Hopefully you've learned a few tips and tricks here about using Nearpod in a way that might make things a little bit easier for you going forward. I also hope that if you need to, you go back and check on Nearpod 101 and 201, so you can kind of, if you need a refresher or you're still just learning about Nearpod, you can kind of catch all the things that we talk about, from the lesson library to creating your own lessons and all of those kind of things too. So hopefully with the 3 videos combined, you'll be able to have a good foundation for creating your own Nearpod lessons, and also for being able to make Nearpod a very useful tool for you in your classroom. And don't forget that I'm always here. Please let me know how I can help. I'm happy to help you if you're working on a lesson, if you need any help with doing that. I'm happy to help if you're going to be doing this with students for the very first time and you want some support with that. I'm here for that as well. So any way that I can help you in your journey to using Nearpod, please let me know how I can do that. So that's the end of this session. Thank you for watching this video, and I will see you next time.